All right, here we go. Hello, YouTube. I'm Richard Quiner. Welcome back to the RPG Daily, to the Game Master's Craft. Today we have a very special guest. This is Vivian Quach from the Unscripted Tales on Instagram. Actually, just Unscripted Tales. She is a smaller Instagram creator, but she still has some big ideas and brings that to every time she posts. She has some great DM tips, great player tips, which is something you don't see very often in the community, in my opinion. So we're just going to get right into the interview. Not yet. Now, Vivian, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk to me a little bit. Before we dive into all the important things, what is it that you create for D&D, and what is your interest in the hobby?
Hi, so I create or provide player tips, dungeon master tips, and also random encounters for your enjoyment. I enjoy doing this because my Instagram is mostly like my live journal. It's my outlet into the community, and I always hope for feedback as well as if in the case I do help someone, that makes me really happy.
All right. And I've been keeping an eye on your stuff. I think it was, who was it? Lily, aka Best of D&D, aka Just a Little Nerd. She had posted about you a while back, and that's
Oh,
how I found your stuff, was through her, because she posts all the time and she has a lot of information out there.
I
Um,
love her a lot.
she's entertaining. Hopefully I'm gonna get her on the show eventually. Hopefully, working on that still. Um, Before we get into the stuff you create, how is it that you got into D&D, and how long did it take you to start actually running your own games?
I was introduced to D&D about 10 years ago. One of my best girlfriend asked me if I wanted to play. She got the whole fourth edition set. I think that's what was
Oh,
popular
fourth
back then.
edition.
Yeah.
Oof.
So
Okay.
that was my introduction. Yeah, but being a big nerd back then, when she asked me, I just said, heck no. I did not. Because back then, 10 years ago, you could be a nerd, but you didn't want to be that nerd.
Right.
Um, I was definitely more embarrassed about it back then. But give it about 1 month later, we decided to create characters for fun, no
Yeah. No pressure.
promises. Yeah, no pressure, no promises, no commitment. About like 4 or 6 hours later, I'm writing down note cards. I don't ever play fourth edition, but they had like the encounters, the dailies, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was making flashcards. I was drawing my character, writing backstories, and that was my introduction to Dungeons and Dragons. But
Okay.
and as soon as we started that campaign, though, it just ended really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And give it a 5 year lull. I remember just sitting in my room going, if I don't become a dungeon master, I will never play D&D ever again. And that's basically how I became a dungeon master from then.
You saw something lacking in your life and you decided to
Yeah.
take that step. I feel like that's a very relatable story that a lot of people, we relate to that. I wanted to play more. I was already playing one, but I wanted to play more. So then I was like, you know what, I'll just run some games myself. And
Mm-hmm.
then, years later, here you are making content. What is it you enjoy most about the game? What kept you coming back?
I really enjoy the what my friend bring to the game. I can have my story, I can write it endlessly, but what they do and how we react to each other is what really draws me back to it. Um, because I just never suspect what my players are gonna do. I can prepare 10,000 paths and they'll choose the 10,001. Um, yeah, so I think the surprise element's really what draws me into D&D the most. Uh, like a episode you can't predict.
Okay. That is a really good answer for that. And that is definitely something we all see. I don't know, have you run modules? Are you a module person or are you a homebrew adventure person?
I've been doing a lot of homebrews. I finally picked up a module this past week, the Lost Mines of Endelver.
Okay.
I'm not sure am I saying that right, but yeah. But I've always been doing homebrews. This is my first time running a module.
Well, good luck with that then. I've attempted to run the Lost Mine of Fandelver probably 4 times. I've never been able to get the players to stop and look at the cart at the beginning because they want to do something else. So it always devolves into a homebrew adventure eventually. So good luck with that. But that is a good
Wow.
adventure for starting, for learning modules. That's a really good one to get into.
Hmm.
Um, Going back to your preparation, and you to mention you can prepare 10,000 options, and they will choose that 10,001st option that you didn't think of.
Hmm.
How have you found any tricks to get yourself prepared for that 10,001st option?
I really know my players very well. So when they tell you to do session zero, do it. You need to get to know your players, whether they like encounter more, they like storytelling more. And I think that really helps for when they do throw something out of the left field. You know how to respond to their, I guess, personality. And that's what I tend to do is I cater a lot of my games to my players' personalities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh, First session is always going to be rough. I try to do a little mix of both storytelling and encounters, and I see which one they really grab towards. And from then on, my next session, I either put more storytelling, less encounter, or vice versa.
Interesting. That's a really interesting way to do it. I want to look at your concept of session zero because that is something we always say, but then it's a lot of times it's easier said than done.
Hmm.
What has been your experience with session zeros, and do you have any tips for new DMs who need to run them but might be a little confused about how they work?
I actually learned from other people about Session Zero from the community.
Mm-hmm.
I think Satine Phoenix has a really good video on Session Zero. But I basically tell my players what kind of DM I am, and I tell them I'm actually really into storytelling. Uh, so whether we clash in that is up to you. But I'm really straightforward with how I like to DM, and then from there they can make their own judgment on me and see how well we work together, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's my approach to session zero. I never really had a sit down session zero because I always play with my coworkers.
Oh, okay.
So I always went to desk, go hi. I know you're busy right now, but let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
And that's okay. That's an interesting way to do it. And I'm sure your coworkers appreciate you distracting them at work. That's always a fun activity. That's how I got into D&D also, was my coworkers were into it and then they invited me. So you basically turned, instead of a session zero, you turned it into kind of a one-on-one impromptu session. And you were saying you were just very straightforward about your DM style.
Yeah.
Have you seen any? How have players responded to your DM style? Obviously, you have groups that you run still. You were mentioning you had friends. Have you ever had a player that was just too much or a troublemaker?
Yeah, so when I started playing Dungeons and Dragons 5 years ago, um, I really had to learn again how to even do this. I actually had some players quit on me because obviously there's just some clashing in the table. It did upset me at first, but I just kind of learned from the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had some problem players which I didn't address, so that actually made other people leave the table. So that's my first experience into DMing when I first got back into it. Nowadays, I do talk to the players. Uh, I message them or I talk to them in person, telling them, "Hey, your character is being a bit destructive to the group right now. I hope you know this. Um, Whether you're going to continue this, know that there might be consequences." So now I'm more direct
Mm-hmm.
versus the first time I dungeon mastered.
That's really good. That's awesome. Wow. So you kind of like started DMing and then you were just kind of thrown into the deep end with a couple of troublemakers. But it sounds like you handled it well. It sounds like you figured it out.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, after watching people leave the campaign, it's like something is very wrong here.
I think we've all. I don't. I've kind of lost count of how many players I've had leave campaigns, and that could say something about my DMing style.
No, I mean it's
We'll get it.
sometimes
That's something for me
yeah.
to reflect on later. I did have a question in the audience that I do want to ask you early because it applies. They asked, "Does your company allow for D&D during work time?"
No, it doesn't. I had my books like sitting on my table once, and my manager came up to me and said, "Vivian, this is a workplace. You might want to put those books away." Which is weird because everyone else has like CDs on their table or I don't know, their Funko Pop figures and stuff like that. And I was like, "Oh, I guess this one book is what broke the camel's
That's it.
back."
That's strange.
Yeah,
Just a book. It's just a book. Oh well.
yeah, that's
That I can't get behind that. That's kind of crazy, especially since businesses now are getting so into the team building side of Dungeons and Dragons. Um,
yeah.
have you seen since you've been playing with your coworkers somewhat? How does that translate from coworker to Dungeons and Dragons adventure party? Have you seen any change in dynamic or anything interesting come from that kind of relationship?
Oh yes, actually one of them has talked to me recently about wanting to become a dungeon master or two, and I
Nice.
recommended him a few of the modules if he doesn't want to homebrew.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them still sometimes talk about say, remember when we defeated that dragon by biting its tail? Things like that. And then more recently in my current job, people do come up to me and say, "Hey, I heard you're a dungeon master," and I just look at them nervously, going, "Who told you?
Right.
How did you find out?"
Yeah. How did they find out? Did they ever answer that one?
I guess I talk about it really
Oh, okay.
often.
So you accidentally told them at some point.
Yeah,
That's kind of
probably.
fun. That's a good opportunity at work, especially since you're creating your content, you're creating your encounters and stuff. That's an interesting way to kind of spread the word, get people more
Hmm.
involved. I wanted to pivot and talk about some of your Instagram stuff because you come up with some very, like I mentioned before we chatted, you had some really straightforward DM and player tips, and there was one that I really liked, and I wanted to know how you came up with it. And I'm gonna pull it up because I forgot what the wording was exactly.
Oh
Um,
no, my writing is terrible.
no.
Sometimes I read my post and I'm like, oh no, typo.
Oh no, it was an alternate rule for DMs that I thought was really
Yeah.
interesting. And you said you have the players write down goals and put them in a jar, and at the beginning of a session, have them draw a goal out and try to complete it.
Yeah.
How did
Uh,
you come up with that idea? Because that's actually kind of interesting and kind of unique.
Gloomhaven. I don't know if you played that.
I have not played that one. I've heard a lot about it, and I know they
Yeah,
have Frosthaven.
yes,
So you played Gloomhaven and you stole that idea from them.
definitely. Gloomhaven has
Okay.
so many good ideas. Yeah, in Gloomhaven, before you enter a dungeon, you always draw these two session goals. They're a lot meaner. A lot of time it's just take all the money or open all the doors. I don't know, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, I have my players write goals that they think they want to do. So it's a lot more friendlier in that aspect. I had some goals where it's just buy someone an apple or
Mm-hmm.
uh, ask someone out on a date. Just something.
Okay.
It's just something really silly. Things
Mm-hmm.
that if your character does it, I think it really helps your character grow.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't do it, same thing. I think it just shows something in your character. If you are really shy to ask someone out, I think uh, overall these session goals really help you develop your character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's an interesting idea because I've looked at the idea of goals in character development and in kind of taking your own space. Um, how do your well, we all know the ideal situation, right, is every player, every character gets their own little time at the table. They get to share, the spotlight a little bit. Have these goals helped influence that at your table much, or what have you seen come of that?
Yeah, even though I ran, I think maybe 3 sessions now, different games, I never really had, I guess, romance between the players.
Mm-hmm.
And because one of the goals was to confess your love, um, my player actually did that in the middle of the game. She found a really opportune moment where, as a one of my NPC was kind of hounding her and going, "Why are you doing this? Why are you being so flustered? Come up with a plan already." And she suddenly just blurted out, "I was like, because I love him," and I was like, "Whoa."
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a really interesting moment in the game, and everyone just went quiet and go and just like looked at her.
That's a great way to just take the spotlight and say, "Wait, watch this for a minute."
Hmm.
Um, that sounds really fun. I think I'm gonna steal this idea, but I have one more question before I try to implement it. Are the characters coming up with goals just for themselves, or is it like a communal pool of goals that they all put their ideas into?
It's a communal pool, so I
Okay.
just have them, write goals that you would like, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of like when you buy a gift that you want.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so write a goal that you would like to do, and possibly someone else would like to do it too.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna steal that. I have a game a little later tonight actually that I'm gonna try to implement that because
Nice.
they're a bunch of guys and they all get their own ideas, and so I'm gonna throw a little wrench at it. So I'm stealing that, and that's what I do on this show is just steal ideas from everybody. Um,
Nice.
Encounters. You come up with a lot of interesting, different kind of encounters. Where do you come up with your best ideas?
3 a.m.
Three.
in bed.
So you just wake up, I have an idea, and you write it down.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. And I started like typing fervently on my phone. Boyfriend glances over. There's like a light on my face. Um,
Okay, that's a
uh,
straightforward. Do you get inspired from
I
anything?
guess. But a lot of times it's usually straight right after I have a session, I start writing encounters. So right now I haven't posted anything in a while, just because I haven't had a session in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I have a session, that's when I come up with all my DM tips or player tips, because that's when I'm like, oh, that worked really well. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
someone else wants to try it. And same with my scenarios. A lot of times I had it in my game. I was like, hey, this actually
Mm-hmm.
worked. Someone else can use this maybe. Um, so
Okay.
that's usually how I come up with it.
That's a good way to do it when it's fresh in your mind and you've just tried it out. So that's pretty cool. Um, there was one oh inspirations. Do you have any inspirations that you pull from in maybe pop culture or other things that you use in your games?
My inspiration mostly comes from either what book I'm reading or shows or games I'm playing. Right now, I'm really obsessed with Final Fantasy VII, so I've been getting a lot of ideas from that game.
Nice. Is the remaster as good as everyone makes it out to be?
I'm afraid
Yes.
I don't
Okay.
want to finish it. Yeah, that's how
Okay.
good it is. I don't want to finish it.
All right. All right. I'll have to get it now. Dang it. More money being spent. Cool. I think those kind of things. The Final Fantasy series comes up with a lot of interesting concepts. And this is just now me thinking off the top of my head. Have you stolen any of those ideas and thrown them at your players?
Not yet,
Not yet.
because I just found, but I've been thinking about it.
Okay.
I'm really in love with the world of Midgar right now, and how they have these cities below the government, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking about a world right now where you have tiers of course, the higher you ascend in these tiers, is probably more affluent,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, so that's where my mind's going right now.
Nice. So you could just make a city, have that kind of be the situation, and your players, they may recognize it, they might not. Who knows? You never know.
You know what? One DM told me a long time ago. that it's okay to just use things that are familiar. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter. The players are going to enjoy regardless. They might suddenly found out they've been playing, I don't know, Lord of the Rings this whole time, but they're still going to love it. They're not going to suddenly get up like, I already saw this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's their story. It's not the
Yeah.
movie that they're not watching the movie, they're living the story. And that's very true. That's a great piece of advice. Speaking of advice, I wanted to get your number one tip for new dungeon masters.
Okay. I think just wear your best clothes, put on some lip gloss, and just go for it. That's it's
Okay.
and I no, I say this
Uh-huh.
because I know for a lot of new dungeon masters they can get nervous.
Mhm.
They might think, oh, I don't know all the rules. It's can be overwhelming, but if they just remember at the end of the day that this is a collaborative game, collaborative storytelling, that they're not alone in this. Someone else on the table can know this part of the rule, and they can
Mhm.
always help you. They can always help you keep track of initiative if that gets too much. They can even help you keep track of damage taken on your monster. So if you ever feel like you can't do it because it's too much work, just remember your players are there to help you.
Mhm. Yeah, have you ever done have or that is a really good idea actually, farming tasks off to the players. I think that's a great piece of advice. Because yeah, like I mentioned before, I've only been running games for the last 3 years or so, and it took me up until probably 6 months ago before I started giving my players tasks.
Yeah, me too. It took about this past year until I
Hmm.
realized this.
And have you noticed? I've noticed it, but have you noticed a change in the player investment in the game once they're given like this is my job, I have to do this? Do they have a change?
They don't look at their cell phone as much, which is great news. Yes, they do actually are more engaged. Like, for example, one of my friends, she actually is now taking notes for me. Really things that she finds memorable. So
Mm-hmm.
when we do the session review the next time we meet up, she actually remembers more than I do.
Oh
She,
wow.
yeah, and actually in more detail too, because it's really hard to remember things when you're just speaking in the moment. But
Mm-hmm.
as she's listening, she's able to record what I'm saying.
Yeah,
So
that's a good idea. Have like, did she just start doing that on her own, or did you ask her to do that?
she started doing that on her own, actually.
Hmm.
I think because some sessions we started forgetting some NPCs' names. That's my bad. It's when they just talk to a random person. I was like, I don't know. His name is Garrettson. I don't. So and I just
Yeah.
forget that the next time around. Um, but because of that, I think she started taking notes for me. Like, oh, we met this guy, and this is his name.
Mm-hmm.
So um,
That's very nice of her. That's really nice.
yes.
Because nothing's worse than having your players, and if you've been here, you have your players. You've introduced an NPC that you didn't have planned, and then they run into that NPC 2 sessions later, and they're like, "Oh yeah, what was their name again?" And you're like, let me
Ooh.
look. And I
Yeah.
didn't take notes, so now his name is Hank, and it's not Garrettson that he was, 2 weeks ago. Um, that's really great. That's amazing. Um, do you have any tips for other DMs that might want to get that kind of interaction from their players in that investment into the game? Like, how do you get your players invested? I guess is the better question.
I like to use props a lot. Anything like just holding a light in your hand and just like moving around, it really grabs our attention. I like also moving around the table. You're just presenting.
Mm-hmm.
So any if you ever feel like there's a lull in the game, people are kind of spacing out. Just shift yourself anywhere to the left, to the right,
Mm-hmm.
walk behind them, and you'll be able to grab their attention throughout the whole session. Promise.
Yeah, that's like a basic idea that we forget a lot once we're behind the screen. Like the power of just standing up while you're playing D&D.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately people will look at you and be like, "Oh, something big's happening," even if you don't have anything going on. So I like that idea, just moving around a little more. We forget that sometimes. That is some good ideas, some good
I
advice.
know Nowadays, since we can't meet up, Roll20 is a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I would say probably change your voice every now and then. Not using character voices, but
Mm-hmm.
just the tone of it. And
Yeah. Have you been running games online since the lockdown?
yes, a lot of people have been contacting me asking me to be their dungeon master recently.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
How has that been for you from a dungeon master experience running the games? Because I know it's different, but how's your experience been?
It's really great because I've been playing with my friends for 5 years, but now I'm actually getting new players, and I just don't know what to expect from them anymore. And this is during this time is when session zero is the most important, is to just know what your characters or your players like and don't like.
Yeah.
Um,
And have you been using Roll20?
yeah, I've been using Roll20.
Okay.
Uh, the video system is all right.
Oh, yeah. I've never tried their video stuff. I've only ever used the maps. So,
It's okay up to 3 players, and I started to notice anything more than that's when it starts getting glitchy.
oh, that's kind of a bummer. Now would be the time they would want to step it up and make something, really amazing for the community, because I feel like now every more and more people are wanting to get into the game because it's a social interaction you can do online. You can do it over long distances. Um, you mentioned briefly before the interview that you had played Pathfinder. Have you played any other game systems as well?
Pathfinder, Starfinder, and Monster Heart.
Monster Heart.
That
I've
one's
never
silly.
heard of it.
It's so silly.
What is that one about, and how does that one work?
My friend introduced me to that one. He's really into a bunch of tabletop RPGs. He listens to a bunch of podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
But Monster Heart specifically is your typical um, uh, teenage setting where you have vampires, werewolves, ghosts, skulls, all your teenage angst.
Okay.
And
All right.
and it's a very simple system. You just, I believe, you just rolls d6s, and like 13 above is a pass, 13
Mm-hmm.
below is a fail, something like that. Sorry, I don't know. I never DM'd it myself. I
Oh,
only
okay.
played it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a really great game. If you want something quick, it's not even meant to last for more than maybe 3 sessions.
Oh, so it's a very quick kind of RPG system.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Um, Following up on that one, what has been your favorite system outside of D&D that
Right
you've?
now, Starfinder and Pathfinder 2. I wish I can like mixing. I don't know why they didn't take some of Starfinder and put into Pathfinder 2.
uh,
It,
Go ahead.
So I love Starfinder because they have stamina points and hit points,
Mm-hmm.
and I always mix the two. But I believe hit points are harder to regain, and that makes sense. It always bothered
Mm-hmm.
me in fifth edition that when you are at zero, you just heal and suddenly you're better again.
Mm-hmm.
But in Starfinder, they really took that into consideration where it takes a lot more to heal yourself. So I believe stamina goes down first, and then if you get into your hit points, that's when it takes more to heal yourself. So you don't want to hit into your hit points.
Interesting. So it's kind of like a shield or something that you got.
It's like a reserve that you don't
Yeah.
want to go into. And then Pathfinder 2, I really love the encounter system where you just have a 3 action economy, and it's amazing. You can do anything that within 3 actions.
Mm-hmm.
You can just move all 3 actions and just run for it, or do magic missile 3 times, something like that. And I think that's really simple and easy. You don't have to think about like, oh, I have one bonus action, I have one movement, and I have one uh, major action.
Yeah.
So
That sounds so easy to remember. Just like 3 actions. That's it. Versus
mhm.
D&D, where you're like action, bonus action, sometimes only if you've got it.
Yeah,
Reactions, sometimes only if you've got it. And then with the actions, you got the extra attacks you got to count on. Oh, that's so much stuff. That sounds
yeah.
actually fantastic. I may change my whole channel and focus on Pathfinder now and just
Sure.
throw it all out the window.
Pathfinder 2 is more player friendly. Pathfinder 1, that's that'll take some time.
Yeah, I've heard Pathfinder 1 was essentially 3.5 edition, and
Yes.
then they like made it their own. And then fourth edition happened, which you've experienced, I played that myself. It's a tough one. It's really tough.
It's
Um,
okay.
yeah, yeah, it's all right. And then there's fifth edition, which is, you know, now I don't know if you've seen this graphic going around. There's something like 40 million fans of D&D players
Oh, that's
in the
amazing.
world. And they were some ridiculous numbers for 2019 that came out, and I thought that was really interesting to me. What do you think is the most appealing aspect of tabletop role playing games for most people? Just your speculation.
I think everyone always wanted to create their own character. I think someone's lying when they watch a show and they say they never made a character in that show. So that's why I think that there's that
It
there's
depends on
always
the show. Depends on the show.
there's always at least one show. So
Oh yeah,
I think that everyone always wanted to, and because it's become more popular, this is just they got their chance, and uh, it's now more available to them, and they don't have to be shy about it anymore, like I
that's
was
true.
10 years ago.
Right. When you say no to a game because you don't want to be seen that nerdy, that's it's quite something. But hey, yeah,
10 years
it's
ago was a lot different than now.
yeah. I think we've all experienced that. Now I want to have this is a harder question to ask, but I like asking this because it humanizes DMs a little bit. But what is your hardest? Hold on, I had it perfectly phrased and then I just forgot it. What is the thing in running Dungeons and Dragons or role playing games that you struggle with the most?
I struggle with description. I have a really hard time describing things. I just tell them like, you arrive in a town, what do you do? Instead of going like, oh, you arrive in a town, you see brick roads leading up to a fountain, and you smell bread in the air. See, I'm struggling right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do know that a great piece of advice for when it comes to describing scenery is to just go through the senses: what you hear, what you smell, what you see, maybe
Mm-hmm.
even what you feel when you step on the ground, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And have you started putting those into play
I
in
try to,
try?
yeah. So when I first start the session, I do all that, but then for some reason, halfway through the session, I just drop it all and I just forget again.
Yeah, because you're having too much fun,
Yeah, I
right?
trying to like push the story along, but no, this that's something I should really try to uh, put more into my campaigns.
No, that's interesting. So thinking of it as something that you want to try and work on, aside from the five senses, do you have any ideas or tips that could help other dungeon masters who might struggle with the same problem?
Read a lot of books, I guess. Get see how they describe it. Even if you just pick up a module and see how they do it. Reading Fandelver for the first time, I'm like, oh, you guys don't actually write a lot of descriptions. Usually, three sentences at most, but it's enough. That's all you really need. You don't need this whole grand paragraph where you're just talking for 3 minutes about how the city looks.
Mm-hmm.
All you need is a really short description, and then let your players have fun with it.
Right, that's a good tip. I like that. Uh, I think reading modules has changed a lot of how I run games too. Or like I went just recently, I wrote a module, um, and writing it and looking at how other modules are written changes things. How like your brain works a little bit. But I
Mhm.
struggle with that myself, doing descriptions. So I have to go read more. I think.
I also heard that you should also turn on closed captioning when you're watching shows, because sometimes there'll be like eerie noises in the background, or um, quietly sobbing. I don't know, something like
Uh
that.
huh.
And then little descriptions like that really helps.
Might give you
Uh,
like little adjectives that you could use.
yeah,
Interesting. I had that's completely new. I've never heard that one before. So closed captioning on television shows. Interesting. Especially with shows that are like very moody or something like The Witcher on Netflix, you could probably do really well with that, or Game of Thrones, stuff like that. I could see that working. Um,
yeah, definitely all those shows.
yeah. Uh, we have a question in the audience that we're gonna tackle, and it's a tough one. I think.
Okay.
All right. Um, it's a multi-part question, so I'm just gonna kind of read through all of it, and he's had some suggestions, but we're still gonna answer this. Okay.
Okay.
He says, "My friends and I are wondering where we can find a DM. Any suggestions? We usually take turns, but we want to play together. Also, we're a group of 7, and we're looking for an online platform to use for battle maps rather than a cell phone. Roll20 doesn't sound optimal. Any suggestions?" So let's break this down. First, I want to tackle the battle maps because I'll just make a suggestion outright. For battle maps, Roll20 is pretty good for battle maps,
Mm-hmm.
but it does take extra work. I don't know. Have you played with the battle maps in Roll20 very much?
Yes, it does take work, but I think dungeon master in general just takes a little
Yeah,
extra
yeah.
work.
Um, but I heard a really good piece of advice the other day in another interview where the guy suggested instead of worrying about battle maps, find pictures that set the mood of the scenario and then just focus on keeping it in your head, a theater of the mind kind of thing. So that's my suggestion for tabletop like your virtual tabletops. There is no such thing as a super easy one, but I
Mm-hmm.
also did do a video about Google Draw because Google Draw could be used as a virtual tabletop and it's free and it's really easy. But the other one, they were asking where can they find DM. So I wanted to know from your perspective, where's the best place to look for dungeon masters if you have a group of players?
I have been talking about this, and I think right now the community is so great that it's actually a good time to try Reddit, and I think they have like a join groups subreddit, something like that, or looking for a group.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then for me, Instagram has been really helpful. I didn't real because Instagram has always been such a like me, look at this selfie I just took.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays it's if you just look around, there's just so many people that's also looking for groups to play with, or looking for players. So I just hit social media. Facebook might even have groups ready for you to look up. Um, yeah, this is in COVID times is a bit strange because you have to use the internet a lot. I
Mm-hmm.
usually just approach people and say, "Hey, do you want to play Dungeons and Dragons?" Now it'll be weird.
Yeah, you don't want to approach people right now. Keep your
Yeah,
distance. Stay safe.
I wish I knew the subreddit right now, but there is a subreddit for looking for
I
groups.
believe it's just LFG,
Okay, that's it.
but
Okay.
I'm gonna look it up right now to make sure. But I've heard that myself too. That one's a really good one. Also, D&D Beyond forums has a looking for group forum as well. Yeah, r/LFG is Reddit. That's a really good suggestion. Finding things. So I'm going to build on that one though, because you're now getting approached by people looking for a dungeon master. Um, how do you vet the players or dungeon master that you want or potentially could play with? Do you have any questions that you ask to make sure they would be a good fit at your table?
As a dungeon master for the player or
Yeah,
for
we'll go that way because I feel like you have more experience that direction.
uh, a lot of people that approach me, I have talked to them before, so I already get along with them.
Mm-hmm.
But I also tell them if they're gonna find a group, find someone that you want to work with for 4 hours. If you're gonna be alone with someone in for 4 hours, can you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I think that's something I've been telling a lot of people recently. Like you might get along for right now, but just imagine sitting with them for 4 hours, and
Yeah,
what do you think would happen?
I hadn't even thought of that. That's a really good point.
I'm
That's
not trying to discourage people from playing with each other. Of course, try it, but something
right.
to consider. And I think that's what happened with my first group when I first
Mm-hmm.
DM'd about 5 years ago. Is that we already clashed at work, but for some reason we wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons together,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that work clashing kind of got brought to the table.
Yeah, it can definitely do that. But I'm sure you've learned, and in my opinion, there's always a every player has a dungeon master. There's a dungeon master for every player, and there's players for every dungeon master that will
Yes.
fit the style completely. Um, of the 3 pillars of adventure, which one's your favorite as a dungeon master?
Oh, not really understanding the question.
Um, So the three pillars in the books, they call it exploration, social interaction, and combat. And that's kind of
Uh,
how all role playing games work, apparently. So I'm wondering which of those is your most favorite thing to run.
I actually love, I enjoy the challenge of encounters and making it interesting. So I like encounters and I like the social
Mm-hmm.
interaction. The exploration is something that I have in the future, but I rather have the players um, get to know each other and get along with each other first,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully have fun in my encounters.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully.
And when you say encounters, what is your definition of encounters?
Whether it's an actual fight or even if it's just a puzzle I give them.
Okay.
Yeah, like sometimes I like to give them, I don't know, a magical door that won't open and seeing what they do with that. I consider that as an encounter.
Yeah. Okay. Looking at combat encounters, because this is interesting that you said you like encounters. So I'm gonna pull on this one. How have you come up with ways to make balanced encounters for your players? Like, what are some of your tricks in that?
That balance encounters, I still haven't mastered that,
Okay.
but I like to make it more interesting for them. So it's not that
Mm-hmm.
they're just sitting, sitting there just waiting for their turn. So what happens is when players attack, I start describing. So oh, as you go in for the attack, uh, Dorian ducks over and sweeps him under the leg. So it seems more like they're fighting with each or together and not just one player just stepping up attack, another player steps up attack. So I try to really mesh their scene together.
That's great. You have them all kind of acting at once, and that makes it more exciting. Your players enjoy that.
Yeah, I think it keeps their focus a lot more.
Mm-hmm. That's a great piece of advice for people in general. Just keeping that energy up is really good. And that's something I think a lot of people struggle with. I don't know. I personally struggle with keeping the energy up in combat. When I make a combat encounter too powerful, then it lags on, and then it gets a little dull. And if it's
Mhm.
too easy, then it's not satisfying enough. Um, have you? How do you keep the energy up, even if the encounter seems to be too strong for the players? Aside from the advice you just gave.
I keep the energy up by just how do we say this? Even if they all seem to be struggling with the fight and they don't seem to be having fun anymore, I guess I just remind them that um, there's other options. They don't have to just keep fighting to the bitter end.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Try to give me something else besides landing a hit. Maybe I'll give you inspiration if you decide to like backflip off the ceiling. I don't know, off the wall into the ceiling and like do a like a Zelda like downward sword on them.
Nice.
So I tell them to like just start giving me more creative ways to fight this, and maybe it'll be more effective um, than just telling me, "Oh, I just want to hit them with my great axe."
Okay.
I think the more description they give me, and I can visualize this, I actually give them inspiration for it.
Okay. Then that keeps them getting descriptive, and that just snowballs.
Yeah.
Nice. And do your players use the inspiration? Because I've had the problem. My players hoard inspiration if I let them. Where so one guy will have like 5 inspiration that he gathered up, and I realize later that I'm like I shouldn't let them hoard it. I should make them use it in that session. Do your players use their inspiration quite a bit then?
I have them. I have to remind them. They kind of forget. I try to
Oh.
give them either tokens
Mm-hmm.
that they can physically hold on to, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I have inspiration." But I also tell them that it's a one session deal. If you don't use it, then it doesn't roll
It's
over.
gone. Nice. I think
Yeah.
that's how it was supposed to be, and then I
Oh,
messed it up.
oh no.
But
I mean, that's it's and if you give out a lot of inspiration, I try also. I guess don't give out too many inspiration because
mhm.
if you give out too many, then I guess it kind of becomes not really inspiring.
Right. That makes sense. Where an inspiration loses its inspiringness. Um, Vivian, that was some great advice. Thank you so much for coming on here today and taking the time. I have one last question for you, and it is where can everyone find you on social media if they want to see all your content, and what can they look for on there?
Oh, find me on unscripted period tales. Um, I will don't post very often, but if you take a look at it, you can find a lot of DMTIS player tips that hopefully will help you in your session, especially if you're a new DM. And if anything, comment on my thing if you feel like you disagree, and we can discuss it together. And I really enjoy that. So please
Right.
talk to me.
All right, yeah, and that will be linked in the description of this video afterwards, so anyone can go find you on Instagram. Follow her over there. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, do so, please, viewers, because I appreciate that. And we're bringing these interviews. We have a really great interview tomorrow. We have Chase Webb from Rollinat 20 is coming on. He's my last interview this week, and then next week I got a whole other lineup, so stick around. Again, Vivian, thank you so much for coming on the show. I
Thank
know
you so much for having me. Thank you so much. This
you're
has been really fun.
I appreciate you taking the time, especially in this crazy time we're in now, where we're all locked in our apartments. Basically, it's good to talk about this hobby that we enjoy so much. So yeah, so hopefully the viewers have learned something. I sure have. That's the important thing for me.
Thank you
Um,
so much for doing this.
and with that, we will call it. Thank you all for joining us, and have a good one.
Bye bye.